Well, welcome to another episode of Inside the Outhouse, and my name's Pete Smith, founder, orator, and telemarketer, and we have a very exciting guest inside the Outhouse tonight. But before I get to that, I'm just going to do some acknowledgements and make a couple of announcements. I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognize the continuing connection to lands, waters, and communities. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and their elders, both past, present, and emerging. I'd like to thank the amazing Outhouse oligarchs for all their hard work and toil to make this vital community project happen and look beautiful. And without any further ado, I'm going to welcome inside the Outhouse to finish off a fantastic month in October, where we started with sustainability. We went to AEE conference, and we went to John Kahneman with his whole food calculator, and now we've got Dr. Anita Pryor to come talk to us about everything ABAT and the up and coming mental health symposium. Anita has had a long career in this area. She started with an outdoor education degree at La Trobe between 1990 and 92, and has been involved in building outdoor health practices ever since. If I just segue to perhaps the latter part of her career, she has done a PhD in public health to build evidence base for Australian nature-based adventure interventions. And in 2009, she, with a couple of colleagues, Pete Ray and Ben Knowles, established Adventure Works Australia, which expands opportunities for bush and adventure therapy in Australia. And that is still operating to this day. She works with the ABAT's Outdoor Health and Policy team and Tom Mulvaney, and she's a very big advocate for this type of work. Without any further ado, before I screw it up anymore, I'm going to let Anita talk for herself, and welcome to the Outhouse, Anita.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be here. And it's about 2 days until we're hosting an outdoor health symposium, so I'll share a little bit about that. But I'm calling in from Nipaluna, Hobart, in Liptrawita, Tasmania, and I'm at home. Up above me is Kunani, Mount Wellington, and so I'm on the land of the Muwanina people who aren't around anymore, and I want to acknowledge the big loss and horror that means that they're not around anymore, and pay my respects and deep gratitude to elders past and present and emerging here in Tassie. There's some amazing Aboriginal leadership here, and against the odds, cultural and on-country practices are thriving in the young people. So it's really, really good time for Aboriginal people here in Tassie. I've heard from a few friends, they're feeling like they're part of things and being respected, and so it's really nice to know that's happening. And this field that I've come from along the way, bush adventure therapy, has tried to, show respect and acknowledge cultural presence in the land wherever we are, and know that bush adventure therapy or these sorts of practices have been happening in this land forever. So, we're newcomers and we're doing new things, but it's the old practices and we've got a lot to learn. Whether you're here in the room or you're watching this presentation later, you could think about what Aboriginal country you're on, what you know about the people, the cultural knowledge, if there's any left, if you can find some cultural knowledge holders, and think about, the work it takes and the time it takes to sometimes forge those connections. If you're in the room and want to put in the chat space where you're from, feel free. I think I recognise a couple of people there. And I don't know what Aboriginal country you're on. I think I know which state you might be in, but feel free to put that in there if you'd like to. You've heard that thanks, Cherie. You've heard that I started in outdoor education by training at La Trobe University, Bendigo, and I was 17 at the time, and straight out of high school, age of 17, saw a outdoor education brochure with climbing and canoeing and ski touring, and I thought, oh, that looks like too much fun to miss out on. I'll do that, and then I'll do a real job later. But that 3 years at Bendigo La Trobe studying outdoor education was so formative. It got me thinking about where I am, who I'm with, and what I'm doing, and how I'm going about it in deep ways. And there were such prodders and provokers and questioners there, and it's hard to shake that off ever since. But I'm curious what you've studied, what training you've had in the audience, and amongst those that are here at this time, but also if you're watching this later, thinking about the training that you've had and how it's formed and shaped you potentially. G'day, Andrew. And you know, the earlier training, whether that sinks into your bones more so than later training, or how different pieces of training and different experiences shape us. And I did I did work in outdoor education briefly and adventure guiding a bit. And then I found my feet working at the Outdoor Experience program in Victoria, which was working with young people at risk. And it was working with those young people that had the beanie down and didn't want to talk to anyone at the start of, you know, a program or a couple of days together. And then by the end of it, beanies off or back, standing up straight, looking you in the eye and starting to talk about who they are and what they want to be. It was those sorts of shifts that got me addicted to this work, I think, and the transformation that we can support through outdoor education, outdoor recreation, no matter who we're working with. And for me, that's a really satisfying and motivating place and way to work. That's really motivates me to this day. And if I jump right back to my childhood, at age of 8, I can remember playing around the bottom of Erskine Falls in Victoria, out in the Otway Ranges, and the splashes of the waterfalls, the tree ferns, the lush rainforest there. And I noticed how good it made me feel, challenging myself to jump from this rock to that rock, or put my head under the water for this long, or taste, feel, smell, jump around the waterfall. And I remember thinking, oh, this makes me feel good, and I'd like to help other people feel good too. And didn't think anything of it at the time. It was more in my outdoor ed university days. I had a little flashback and a little memory of that as a child, and I thought, this work really does help me feel good as a worker, as a practitioner, so why not keep going with it? And I never did get the real job, and I continued on this path. And I added training in a couple of therapies to, you know, build my understanding of how to work with people who've had trauma experiences and drug and alcohol, mental health issues. And so I studied strength-based therapy, or solution-focused therapy it was called, and narrative therapy, and family therapy, a graduate diploma in family therapy, which was really handy for group work because it's all about working with social systems and the spaces between people, those patterns and dynamics that we get into. So I studied it really for the group work that we do so often in the outdoors, and studied mental health, and hit the books to study a PhD to build the evidence base, really, so that we could apply for funding without having to scratch around for research all the time. And that sort of backed me into doing more research, I think, because you can, and it's interesting, and there's lots of research always to do, and requests for research and evaluation. But I've made a real conscious effort this year even with young kids, to make sure that I do a day of practice out of doors again for myself. And gosh, it's been good. And like the 8-year-old self, it makes me feel good. So it motivates me to do all the other layers of work that are involved in supporting this field. So I was curious whether people would like to, in the room, note in the chat space, or if you're watching later, think about what would you say are the trickiest people issues, like people issues or difficulties or disadvantages or disconnections that you're working with in your work at the moment. And what are there's always the workload and the paperwork and the the dynamics between management or funders, and there's all those things, but I'm curious about what you're finding are the tricky areas of practice in your outdoor education, outdoor recreation, outdoor work with people. What are people showing up with that perhaps they didn't used to, or perhaps that's becoming a bit more common these days? And, just read a couple of the notes there in the chat space. Cherie from the US was part of an undergrad outdoor club and then went on to grad school for outdoor education, where you learned you could do it for a living, yeah, and you worked in outdoor ed for the past 13 years. Yeah, brilliant. So US training ground there. And mention that the trickiest area for you are the ones that no matter what you do, they don't want to be there. Golly gosh, good point. And they have to be there. So I guess, I'm assuming that there's little choice on their part. And yeah. Or the ones who are mean and cruel to others. Yeah. Yep, that's really tricky. Yeah. I'll share. We've had more and more requests for training in mental health of outdoor leaders and outdoor educators, outdoor recreation staff, who are saying that they're dealing with more and more mental health issues and anxiety issues, and also fears relating to not being able to have their phones and time away from phones, and the whole social world happening without me if I don't have my phone. So these are some of the trickinesses that have come out through requests to us. I have heard, the last few weeks that COVID's bringing out extra issues, and young people that have been in lockdown and that are coming back to school are showing more addiction to screens, and also sexualized behaviours. And so there's teachers and others, noticing that some of the lack of supervision or some of the too intense home lives that are part of lockdown have had a detrimental effect to young people's mental health. And so these are some of the trickinesses.
Anita, can I interrupt you for a second and just ask a question? So in your work, in your practice, have you found that it is better to not have screens in a sort of, I guess, program context, for want of a better word? Because there is, as you would well know, a lot of debate around the use of technology in the outdoor sector at the moment. And there's been quite a few international kind of symposiums and webinars sort of around that topic. So how are you finding it with the people you're working with?
Yeah, it is tricky, isn't it, that I need my phone for photos, or I need my phone for music, or these apps. And as outdoor educators or outdoor leaders, we've got apps that are useful to us as well. And not to mention GPS or location plotting. And so I see all of that and hear all of it, and it all has merit. And I also think if we don't give a break from phone use, who will, and when will it happen, and where could it happen? And so, especially working therapeutically with people where we're working with mental health and physical health and behaviours and, you know, their hopes for a good life, a better life. And with a phone can be more distracting than helpful in that situation, I think. But I can hear, you know, the argument and the justification for different levels of phone use in different outdoor programs. Yeah. Have others got questions jumping out that you want to throw around? Cyrus, want to say something out loud? Feel free.
Oh, well, there's a question in the chat from Cherie. I know Cherie has got a bit going on in her world with her newly born daughter, so I'll just read it out on her behalf. What kind of recommendations do you have to address those issues? And I'm assuming it's the issues around technology and the issues you were talking about perhaps prior to that.
Yeah. So within bush adventure therapy, there's a list of ethical principles that I might draw on to respond to these. They're not rules and black and white, but they're principles that we aspire to. And so that one about screen use, informed consent is one of the ethical principles. And so we're giving as much information as we can, and even an experience of what people will be in for if they step into our experience before they step in. And so to know that there's no phones up front and have an option to step in, step out, discuss, find a middle ground could be useful if that's possible within your context. Like we were talking about this with Auntie Judy Atkinson a few weeks ago in relation to cultural safety for Aboriginal programs, and we landed on 4 rules: no drugs or alcohol, no violence of any kind, physical, mental, emotional, social, cultural, no sex during the program, and no phones. And that's where we landed when we were talking about keeping young people and adults safe on country from Aboriginal perspective, and I think that's a good list of 4. And if those 4 are presented up front as these are the rules we work with, and if you're stepping into this program or experience, you're stepping into those rules with us, and we do it for these reasons. We hope you'll get more benefits from this experience if you agree and join us in that. That's what I mean by informed consent. I'll touch on the trickiest area for you, Cherie, is working with the ones that no matter what you do don't want to be there. And it reminded me of some training I did in 96 or 97 on motivational interviewing, and it was such a short course but a really powerful one. I was working with young people who often didn't want to be there, and sometimes were mandated that they must go to the outdoor experience or go to jail. So there was a level of coercion there. But using motivational interviewing techniques within that hour of an intake assessment, interview, discussion, you know, what are you coming with? Using the motivational interviewing techniques really gave a lot of power to those conversations, and I found within an hour or so they were arguing to want to come on the program. I was saying, "You sure? Yeah, I really want to do it," and so it really turned it around. I could recommend that. The guts of it is really to lead them through a conversation where you're posing the possibility, and they end up arguing for that possibility. And it sounds a bit manipulative, but really it's carrying a belief in them that they can do it. It's going to be hard, upfront, honest, informed consent. We believe you can do it, and we reckon you'll get a lot out of it. And but I can understand you might not want to. There's other good options in your life, or there's other options. It's not the only option. And So I wonder if that would be handy, motivational interviewing, to look that up. The ones that are mean or cruel to others, that's a really tricky one. And that brings me to think about those group rules that you set up at the front of an experience. And what do we mean by safety? What do we mean by violence? We mean emotional and mental violence as well, that's not okay in this space. And coming back to those agreed shared rules, if you've got space in your program for developing those together. But that is a tricky one. Yeah. I was wondering if, unless there's other questions jumping out straight away. Yeah, thanks, Cherie. That I could run you through a few slides that I shared at the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in 2018 up in Brisbane. And they asked for a presentation on bush adventure therapy. And at that point in time, the Australian Association for Bush Adventure Therapy was just starting to trial the words outdoor healthcare to describe our work instead of bush adventure therapy. So it was an opportunity to test out those words and see if they meant anything, or they rung true to that audience, which were a really interesting bunch of people, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. They had nature and environment at the heart of their work, and they were often talking about, wouldn't it be great to have people more connected with nature in all these ways? And they really were fascinated that practices like bush adventure therapy, or arguably outdoor education, are doing that, bringing people and nature together for health and healing of both. And so if you would like a little run through of those slides, I could talk to those. Oh, you've got some good resources there happening, Peter. Well done.
Well, Cherie has done better than me. I'm quite slow, but yes, we have some resources in the chat, so on motivational interviewing techniques.
Pick off the mark. Well done. Yep.
I was going to ask about, I guess in my career, which has been quite lengthy, working with lots of young people in the outdoors, and I started sort of, I guess, working with at-risk youth. And I was in a situation where I was running a small wilderness program, and I found throughout the course of the 2 to 3 weeks that the people would come, I would get very attached to them. Just because I guess it was such a relationship-based situation, and it was very emotional. And I think with those two things happening, I felt like a person with my personality became very attached to them. Then at the end of the 2 weeks, the young people would leave, and I would go through this massive sort of situation of withdrawal, I guess. And I was just wondering if you could comment on some strategies to perhaps deal with that in our work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's different ways of working. And I heard, Graham Pringle a few times describe, we don't want young people to get attached to us, so we keep our interventions shorter. And I have a different experience and perspective where attachment and relationships with strong, trusting adults is, when it's safe and effective, would ideally be available for as long as they need it. And so as all young people have trusted adults throughout their lives, some young people don't have that and would hope for that. And so I'd say the longer the better, if you can, within the parameters of your service or program. I'll give you an example. The Outdoor Experience program faced that issue early on, 96, 97. We all experienced that that big rupture and that down after an intense 12 days out bush together, 9 days out bush together. And we added a week afterwards, and that was better. And then we added 2 weeks afterwards, and that was better still. And we trialled the last third of all of our trips being preparing to go home. And we spent the last third of programs preparing for transition afterwards. And so I'm giving you these examples because it felt that we need to give that attention, that ending, that transition, and where possible, not just have a cliff, but have supported pathways and relationship opportunities, celebrations, catch-ups, whatever you want to call it, however you want to structure it or program it, to continue the celebration of what they've done and to continue to remind people what they did, and yourself. You know, you've formed some good relationships, and it's pretty unnatural to have them end with no more contact. So I don't know what you'd call it, much more humanist about that. And I think secure attachment theory and research would tell us that trusted adults in people's lives are better if they're longer. Otherwise, we're repeating the rupture of attachments that's sometimes, you know, a cause of stress and tension and trauma for people. Yeah. So there's a long-winded answer to that question, Peter.
Thank you for that very thorough response. I perhaps wish I'd heard that stance 25 years ago, but thank you.
No, it's a good one.
What about other folks in the room? Does I'm really inspired with the presentation so far, but other people feel free to throw into the discussion. Welcome to the dueling Davids, David Maskell, welcome, and David Chitty, welcome. Great to have you both here.
Someone's got a Batman sign. No, that's you. That's David Maskell. What is that? Hey.
Oh, knowing David Maskell, it's some sort of tech symbol which means something to him and very few others. There he is.
No.
No other questions?
Just reading Cyrus's comment there. Starting out in the industry, studying a Cert 4 in outdoor leadership. Yeah, learning more about the therapeutic side of the industry. Yep. Shall I sort of pivot from where we've been towards outdoor health and outdoor healthcare a little bit, and the therapeutic side of the work?
I think that's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And maybe some of you know, in 2005, myself and Catherine Carpenter and Marty Townsend wrote a paper that proposed that outdoor education and bush adventure therapy together span the continuum of public health. And so outdoor education provides prevention and early intervention for a range of difficulties and disconnections, and bush adventure therapy up the other end supports people to in treatment or continuing care. And when we're talking about physical, mental, emotional, social, behavioural difficulties, I guess. So that was a while ago, 16 years ago. And I think we've moved and changed from that perspective to probably think, and this is the question of the night, you know, is outdoor education healthcare? One could see outdoor education and bush adventure therapy and the range of other nature-based health practices as part of the same endeavour that can promote health and also treat ill health and improve quality of life for whoever we're working with. And there's a bit more to suggest along that vein. I've got some slides here I might share if that's possible.
Go for it. Fantastic.
Let's see. Are you seeing a slideshow up there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Bush Adventure Therapy, Outdoor Healthcare. Yep. Not my calendar on the other page, on the other screen. So I'll just make the slideshow work. This was the presentation that I gave at the International Union for Conservation of Nature in 2018. And I think it's probably the closest to giving a little bit of a backwards and forwards view of where we've come from with bush adventure therapy, or get people on the same page as to what the heck that is. And also where we've gone with calling it outdoor healthcare and outdoor health, and the symposium happening this week. So I started by saying in WA, I saw a family, Aboriginal family, wander off into the bush, 4 of them, with nothing. And there was a lot of talk. I was sitting amongst an Aboriginal community, and there was laughter and buys. And I said, oh, what's going on? And they said that family's going bush for their holiday for a couple of weeks. And they had nothing, no esky, no water bottle, nothing, not even hats. And they were going into that bush for their holiday. And wow, that's really impressive. And Tex Screwthorpe, who I know Andrew's met and spent some time with on country too, some of his words and stories stuck with me early on. He says when he goes into new country, he looks for food, water, shelter and medicine. And if he can identify those things, then he belongs there. And if he can't, then he'll need some help to get along and live there. And so, yeah, if I walk into the bush here in Tassie and think, do I belong or do I need help to live here? It's really clear to me that I need some help to live here. It's not easy to find food here in Tassie, or medicine to my eyes. And Tex's imperative in his book, you might have seen it, Treading Lightly, is his cultural imperative of his people was to keep all alive. And I thought that really relates to outdoor education, bush adventure therapy, outdoor healthcare. If we carried that idea as a cultural imperative, wouldn't our society be a different one? And that's not all people alive, that's all critters alive, all species alive, all flora and fauna alive, everything's important. So I wanted to underscore the importance of Aboriginal ways of seeing, being, doing, seeing, and keep those ideas in our mind. Bush adventure therapy emerged in the 90s, probably Michael Gass's book Adventure Therapy in 1993 crystallised those words, but we added bush because it's more relevant to outdoor spaces here in Australia. And we came to describe it as a nature-based health intervention, the active social experiences in nature for therapeutic outcomes. And we've recently called it a bio, it's a physical, biological, psychological, which includes mental and emotional, social, which includes family, community, and ecological approach, which ecological from, say, Tex Screwthorpe's perspective includes spirit and culture in that domain. And it's a diverse field of practice in Australia, connecting with the International Adventure Therapy Network. I mentioned the paper we wrote in 2005 where it placed bush adventure therapy more at the treatment continuing care end of the spectrum, but our research and of the field of bush adventure therapy recently shows that it's more in the early intervention and prevention end of things. Than there are some programs that say work in hospital settings or treat drug and alcohol or mental health issues, or in our organisation's case, we support recovery from family violence in Victoria through a Nature Connect service. But that's where bush adventure therapy tends to sit in the breadth of public health. And in 2018, got some dinner coming. It's nice. 2018, we hosted the 8th International Adventure Therapy Conference in Sydney. and about 550 people, I think, attended from about 24 countries. And in lead up to that event, we met with health ministers and policymakers in different states and territories. And to his credit, a youth mental health advisor of Minister Hunt's said, you know, you guys, you've really got to come up with a better name than bush adventure therapy. It just means nothing to us here in Canberra, and it puts us off. It makes us think of herbal remedies. And he said, what about outdoor health or outdoor healthcare? And we really sat with what he'd said and his generous advice, because he was trying to nut it out with us. He really valued the work, but he thought the name's getting us nowhere. And when we thought about the word outdoor healthcare in the lead up to that conference, and we were lucky to get some good sponsorship from him and the Federal Health Government Department for the conference. When in the lead up, we thought if we're using that name, then it really has to include equine therapy and nature prescribing and horticultural therapy and animal assisted therapy and forest schools and outdoor education. So we had to really build a bigger tent. We could see that. Otherwise, we were just colonising a space that we didn't own all of. And for this audience that this presentation here was for, I gave a little rundown of bush adventure therapy. Yes, it's for young guys, and it can look like this, remote journeys and boot camps. It can look like that, but it has some ethical principles that would have it rolling out very differently. But it's also for young women and older women and mothers and families and men. And it ranges from little short tasters through to integrated community programs and experiences. And you can probably, no matter where you're coming from in the outdoor world, recognise yourself and your programs and services, practices in that spectrum there. Bush adventure therapy happens in a range of intervention contexts, including treatment, which in the US is called like therapy, primary therapy. In Australia, therapeutic practices and therapy with a big T can happen in any of these different settings in different ways. And when it's delivered with a therapy with a big T by a clinical or trained therapist or counsellor, they're usually delivering it in collaboration with people from other disciplines and usually outdoor educators or outdoor leaders.
Hey, Anita,
Yeah.
just another question from Cherie in the chat, and I think it's pretty relevant to what you're talking about right now, so I'll just throw it in. Do you think bush adventure therapy has a specific space, or do you think it is something that should be part of all outdoor programs?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I think therapeutic safety and processes can be integrated into any outdoor program and add value and safety and effectiveness to any outdoor programming. So there's elements of it that can be woven in whatever you're doing, whoever you're working with. But I don't necessarily think it's that different, that it deserves its own, fenced area. It merges and morphs with other fields like outdoor education and outdoor recreation too.
Can I extend the question and just ask, in your extensive experience in working in bush adventure therapy over your life, do you find that you use the skills and techniques you've learnt in that field to work with all the people you work with across all educational settings?
I do. And in my family and in my meetings with government and in organising symposiums like we'll talk about soon. I think there are some things that just enter into your body and your bones and your way of being as much as doing. So
well, Anita, we'll take this question from Cyrus, who's a first time in the Outhaus. And again, welcome to the Outhaus, Cyrus. Feel free to come into the link anytime. What is the best way to be more involved in bush adventure therapy?
Yeah, that's a good question. And there's no one training pathway. There's not a bush adventure therapy degree yet. We're working on that, been working on that for many years. And like AdventureWorks, one of my hats I wear, we have developed a 2-year training program that we believe, from a lot of input, a lot of help, a lot of consultation, we believe would have people ready to design and deliver and supervise bush adventure therapy experiences, but that's not in a university setting yet. And there's a good question, Cherie. Do you need to have therapeutic training to work in the field? It's of benefit, and if you don't, then it's great if you can work with someone that does, and that way you've got psychological safety and care covered, and physical, environmental safety and care covered, and it's probably going to be a more quality, richer experience for that cross-disciplinary team. Yeah, did I answer the question or go sideways?
Good on.
Andrew.
Yeah, hi Anita. It's great to see you here tonight. Just on that same thing, I am curious myself. You stopped the slides there when you said a big T and little t. And I just wonder when the people with a little t get in over their heads or get in too deep. And as you know, I currently still work in the TAFE setting. I was working in a community health setting, working with a mental health program for a while. I felt it was easy for really well-meaning, kind-hearted, wanting to do a good job, help people, get into mental health issues and actually try interventions that they didn't really know the full depth of what they were doing, and then made matters worse. So having an expertise in the big T therapy and working with practitioners who have the expertise, what's your advice on that? Because I still find TAFE students, I want to get into adventure therapy. Well, hang on a minute, just don't go off and run a boot camp for your scouts group, you know, like find out a bit of expertise of what you're doing. So could you just expand on maybe that? Because that really interests me. Where does the line? Or
It's such a great point. And yeah, because you're at one end saying back up, hold on, don't go that deep, and I'm at the other end needing to have more practitioners or people able and willing to work in this space. And so we really do want safe and effective people, and maybe people's the word. In the 2-year training program we've designed and we've trialled once, and we're hoping to get up in a university through AdventureWorks. A key part of the whole course, and I think this comes back to your question, is a subject or a topic area called reflexive practice and reflective practice and growing self-awareness. And so some people have a real awareness and a growing daily practice of trying to be self-aware and watch themselves in the moment and regulate how much they're doing, saying, being, and where the motivation for that's coming from. And so whether you're outdoor trained or clinically trained, any one of us can go in with boots on and do and be operating in a way that's not self-aware, and we're not aware of our own needs coming up in the moment. And any one of us can do that daily work to increase our self-awareness that has us a little bit more aware each day, each time, of what I'm bringing and what my needs are, and make decisions in the moment, conscious decisions about whose needs you're meeting in that moment. And a little practical example of that is me in, which year was it? Maybe it was 1998 or something, did a 4-day course with Martin Ringer and on psychoanalytic psychodynamic processes in groups. And he just slowed down the social process for 4 days, and we watched and observed ourselves in this social process, and it was crazy making in some ways. But I noticed that in a group setting, I had a little bit of a reflex or a tendency to make a joke and have a laugh and bring a bit of humour. And through that, watching and being and watching myself and what I was itching to do or say, that was one of the noticings, was that I was probably using a bit of humour at the start to make myself feel comfortable. And is that really what's needed in the moment? That's just one little example of the importance that we think of self-awareness and the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly work of increasing your own self-awareness about your own needs, your own shit that you bring, your own reflex responses. And then the more we know about ourselves and what makes us tick, what motivates us, the better we'll be able to hold the space for someone else. And in some ways, whatever your clinical or outdoor training, being that kind of person that can hold yourself in the space is really important, and it'll probably help all of us hold back from jumping in with boots on to fix or, you know, make someone laugh immediately. We might still decide to make someone laugh, but we've thought about why and who for before we do it. There's a long-winded answer, Andrew, whether you wanted it or not. But I really love cross-disciplinary teams where you've got different people trained in different ways working together, and it keeps us all on the learning curve together, keeps us humble and keeps us in a space of knowing that we don't know it all as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, set my thoughts into a few different directions there, but yeah, that's good to hear you. Yeah, talking about that. I'm hearing you saying that you just feel like more of us should be getting involved in that area. You don't think there's enough people involved in that therapeutic.
Yeah, here in Tassie, we need more people working ready, willing, and you know, it saddens me when I hear of outdoor training programs closing down, because that's such a great skill set, and it attracts such great people and people to the field. And so I really hope that a lot of outdoor leaders will consider moving into therapeutic space and top up with their training and keep that, whatever training or learning they're doing, hopefully it's raising that self-awareness. Life does that anyway, but it's some of that will increase the safety for participants and self.
It seems to me, Anita, that more and more during all sorts of programming, not just programming for particularly people who are steered towards bush adventure therapy programming, there is a need to have an understanding of the dynamic between those definitions that you put up on the screen before. And do you think it would be better if people who worked in these kind of fields in the outdoors had training specifically in some area like mental health first aid, and should that be a mandatory qualification?
That feels a bit like a mandatory qualification for everyone working with people, doesn't it? Whether you're in schools or camp, hard top camp situations, it just seems to be so prevalent, mental health issues, that yeah, it's part of basic training. And yeah, therapeutic safety and holistic safety, psychological, so mental emotional safety, social cultural safety are key areas of learning that would be good to top up on. And there's not a lot of courses and training programs around. Graham Pringle's got one. We've got a 4-day training course for counsellors to take their work outdoors here in Tassie in the next month. In January, we've got a training program for outdoor leaders who want to add therapeutic elements to their work. And in any of these directions people come in from and top up with, there's potential to be really well-rounded and effective bush adventure therapy practitioners there, coming from different backgrounds.
Anita, Could you possibly put the details of that training that you've got coming up in Tassie in the chat? Because that would, I think, be beneficial to everyone in the room.
I don't want to self-promote here. We'll get talking about the symposium too. I'm aware of time, and like I'll put the training program in. If you go to .org.au and look at training tab, you'll find your way to the outdoor therapy course we're running at the moment. But I will, if it's all right, share my screen again and just share a couple of the slides that take us to the outdoor healthcare side of things, if I can.
Yeah, could I just jump to another question while you're just something you mentioned a minute ago?
Yep.
With us coming out of this sort of time of lockdowns and COVID and all that sort of thing, with governments at the places where they are trying to stimulate different areas and recover, there's a lot of recovery going on at the moment. Do you reckon it's a good time to sort of be striking on Greg Hunt and those in that sort of field to actually acknowledge that we've been deprived of the outdoors shutdowns for so long that now this is like a prime time that the next 12 months that we could be talking about maybe.
I think you're onto it, and right, Andrew, it's like a proliferation of people realising they want to go outdoors for their own health and sanity, and the research and the conversations and the topics on TV. It really is a ripe time for talking about mental health benefits of nature, physical health benefits of nature, social connection benefits of being outdoors together. Yeah, really good timing for that. Costa Georgiadis had a chat with him on Sunday for an hour about that side of things, and because he's seen a lot of gardening, take up of gardening, and and Bunnings and all these places are selling out on landscape supplies. So it's really good timing, Andrew. And Australian Association for Bush Adventure Therapy have put in an application to be a peak body to Federal Health Minister Hunt to see if he'd support outdoor health being a peak body and an umbrella body, and resource it to support the sector. That'd be great for resourcing the work to bring research and practice together. That'd
be a very good thing coming out of this period, wouldn't it?
Yeah, wouldn't it? Yeah, wouldn't it? So in this, I mentioned Minister Hunt's Youth Mental Health Advisor saying, what about playing with the words outdoor healthcare and see how that lands and sits? Well, we've been playing with those words and trialling them for the last 3 years, and we really find them useful in talking to government. They open doors, and it seems like it also opens conversations with a whole new range of disciplines and researchers like health economists and GPs, nature prescribers, those in various settings that work, that understand straight away healthcare is for health of people. What's this outdoor bit? And outdoors more plain language than bush adventure. So we're finding it really useful. And I guess we're playing with outdoor health and outdoor health and outdoor health care, and seeing that those two slight differences engage different conversations and people. So we'll keep working on that. Where we'll land might become clear at this symposium even coming up this week. But it's got huge potential, and just UTAS, University of Tasmania, we've started setting up a research trial to compare indoor counselling with outdoor counselling, and the number of people that are gathering around that project is incredible, and the expertise, and everyone's nodding. The 10, 12 people that are supporting the project are nodding and saying the time's right for this. It's really of great interest to the uni and all these different faculties. Let's do this, and let's try and get the right funding to do it properly. So we're finding it useful, and I'll stop sharing. I haven't actually got slides on the outdoor healthcare symposium coming up this week, but to mention that in 2018, the Australian Association for Bush Adventure Therapy Committee decided to set up a working group called the Policy Unit and called for expressions of interest to lead it. And I put in an expression with 2 others. Tom Mulvaney was one of them. And we got the job, the free, unpaid, volunteer lots of hours job to put some time and effort into progressing outdoor healthcare on behalf of AEDT. And we held a symposium last year called the Nature and Health Symposium. It was really well attended. It was in COVID, and whether that was the timing and the situation, 620 people attended, and it was really nourishing time, that symposium. And it was followed up with a series of roundtables and outdoor health research forums and other ways to connect. And there's a momentum up, and we found that equine therapists and ecotherapists and animal assisted therapists and all those other nature-based health practitioners and researchers are finding a home within that umbrella of outdoor health and outdoor healthcare as well. So it's a growing tent. Uncle Ken Jones described it as a bigger tent within which we can strengthen each other's work. And you know, if we were to pinpoint a horizon line, it might be to have nature and nature-based health practices included in mainstream health services and systems. That might be an aspiration that we could get up in the morning to work towards. So this week is the second symposium, Wednesday, Thursday. If you haven't registered, you can still register, I think, till tomorrow night, Tuesday night. And all those that register can have access to all the presentations and all the recordings for a year afterwards. So if you can't attend on the day, you can jump in and out anytime for the next year. And low price, trying to make it accessible to everybody. Costa Georgiadis is emceeing, so if anyone can keep you awake over 2 days, he can do it. And we've got presentations on the benefits of dirt for human gut health, mental health, through to planetary health, the imperative of looking after the planet. We've got researchers and practitioners. You'll get a taste of bush adventure therapy, equine therapy, forest therapy, ecotherapy through some of the presentations. And we've got challenges to the field, like have we got enough research? What else do we need to do? Are we safe enough? What else do we need to do? And a bit of an update from the Outdoor Health Working Group on the second afternoon as well. So to find that, I'll pop that in the chat space. It's outdoorhealthcare.org.au. And
just while you're doing that, Anita, Dave Chitty has a question.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was just wondering how useful that full-time employee that Outdoors Victoria's got to work with RBAT has been. Has that been of value at this stage of the game? Yeah,
totally, but incredibly valuable. Yeah, it's like we were heading into another really busy 6 months of outdoor health volunteer work. We all do it on the outside and edges of our jobs and days, and do work to midnight sometimes on it, and weekends. And Rochelle, who we were able to employ through that grant, and Outdoors Victoria, has just landed on the run and picked up so much. She's a she would say this, a computer nerd, so she can handle data and technology and platforms brilliantly, which is not the hugest skill or passion of many of us. And she's taken hours and hours and hours of work off our shoulders that we'd be doing otherwise, and doing it so well. So I think all of our families thank her as well, and thank Outdoors Vic for employing her. It's really helped our workloads, and we really hope she can stick around in some way after the grant ends.
My other question, I guess, have you been doing much work with the Laurie in Outdoors New South Wales? Yeah.
Yeah, a little, and we're connected closely through Rebecca Harth, who's ABAT's chair, and Rochelle's now joined a couple of the working groups. So I think we're pretty well connected. Me personally, not so much, but have seen Laurie a few times at different events. So
because it's probably a good subject for a Friday coffee and conversation. Every Friday at 10 o'clock, there's various speakers, and Outdoors New South Wales has probably got the best communication system going as far as the outdoors, I think, or more, on a more regular basis. Queensland's doing well as well. But I think Outdoors New South Wales probably got a national view as well as a state view. I'd be approaching Laurie and perhaps doing a presentation there. I think it'd be a great idea.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah, I might put Becky Hart in the hot seat, who's ABAT's chair.
I'm just going to cut in there and thank you and say what a fabulous discussion. I'm sure it could go on way after the recording, but I just need to step in and stop the recording.